So, now you decide to show up. Her voice was cold, nothing like the warmth that had once soothed me through childhood. Grandma, what's going on? I asked, my words spilling out in a rush, desperate to make sense of the moment. They told me you were in a nursing home. Don't. She raised a trembling hand, and the simple gesture struck harder than any shouted accusation. Your grandfather called you again and again. He was asking for you on his deathbed, wanting to say goodbye to his little scientist, but you never answered, never came. How could you be so cruel? Rosalind, let me see the number he was calling, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Please, Grandma. I need to understand. She hesitated, then disappeared inside. When she returned, she held a small notepad in her shaking hands. The number scrawled across the page was in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. A cold knot twisted in my stomach. That's not my number, I whispered, my breath catching. I've had the same one since high school. They gave you a fake number. Her sharp expression flickered, uncertainty breaking through. A fake number? She echoed. Your parents told us you changed it when you left for university, she added, her voice quieter now. They said you wanted to distance yourself from us. Everything started clicking into place. Grandma, I came home over break. Clara was here. She wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. She went pale. A nursing home? We never... Her voice wavered, her hands trembling. Clara and your parents told us you were too busy with your new life to visit, that you were embarrassed by us, that you didn't want anything to do with your family anymore. They said what? My knees nearly buckled, and I gripped the porch railing for support. How could they? They told us the funeral was at 2 p.m. today, I said, my throat tightening around the words. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I mixed up the times, but I didn't. I would never... Grandma's breath hitched. The funeral was at 10 a.m., she whispered, horror dawning in her eyes. Your parents stood in front of everyone, saying how ashamed they were that you couldn't even bother to come. Clara cried, swearing she tried so hard to reach you. Tears blurred my vision. A heartbeat later, I was in Grandma's arms, both of us shaking, sobbing on the front porch, the weight of betrayal and grief crushing down. He died thinking I abandoned him, I choked against her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Grandma's arms tightened around me, her tears falling freely into my hair. We know the truth now, she whispered. We know. After we dried our tears, Grandma picked up the phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice was steady. Karen? Yes, it's me. I need you, Michael and Clara, to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. No, it can't wait. When she hung up, she looked at me with determination in her eyes. They'll be here in an hour. The lawyer is on his way too. When the doorbell rang, Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you. I listened from the other room as they entered. I heard Mom's practiced social laugh, Dad's formal tone, and Clara's bored sigh. Then Grandma's voice, sharp and commanding. Please, everyone, take a seat. Mr. William is here to read Thomas's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer opened his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable. Mom's perfect smile froze in place, Dad's face turned pale, and Clara's jaw dropped in shock. Mr. William cleared his throat and began. I, Thomas Walker, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room fell silent except for the sound of rustling papers. First came the house, left to Grandma, along with a substantial sum for her care and maintenance. Then the part that made Clara's face flush red with anger. To my granddaughter, Rosalind Walker, I leave my newly constructed Ed Laboratory facility at 1550 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research work. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe my ears. Grandpa had built me a lab, my very own research facility. The remainder of my estate, Mr. William continued, is to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Rosalind and Clara Walker. Clara pushed her chair back abruptly and stood up, her face contorted with fury. But before she could say anything, Grandma raised her hand. "There's more," she said, pulling out a letter. "Your grandfather wanted this to be read as well." I braced myself as she unfolded the letter, memories of Grandpa flooding my mind. "Where should we put this one?" Grandpa would ask each time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. "In the box with the others," I'd reply, pulling out the special cardboard box I kept under my bed. I never displayed my awards, not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't want to seem boastful. Mostly, though, I knew my success made my parents uncomfortable. Clara, of course, had her own take. "Nobody likes a know-it-all," she'd sneer. But she didn't mind asking me for help with her science homework, or better yet, just doing it for her. "Clara, that's cheating," I protested, watching her copy my answers. "Rosalind, help your sister right now," Mom would command in that tone that left no room for argument. Family helps family. And just like that, I'd end up doing Clara's homework, feeling like a fraud but too afraid to stand up to my parents. It became a predictable pattern. Clara would demand, my parents would insist, and I would comply. I hated it. But what choice did I have? Sometimes I'd overhear my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their hushed voices would drift up the stairs to my room, where I'd be hunched over my chemistry set or poring over the latest research paper. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say, exasperation lacing her words. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke, but beneath his forced laugh was something sharper, something that cut deeper than if he'd just admitted he didn't understand me. One evening, after I won yet another science competition, I caught Dad's voice coming from his study. He was talking to Clara about her grades, which had been slipping. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Clara whined. Dad sighed. "Listen, sweetheart, we need to focus on you. Rosalind. Well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, fists clenched, willing the sting in my eyes to fade. They thought they were justifying their neglect with logic, as if being capable somehow meant I didn't need love or support. At school, I was the odd one out, the girl who spent lunch breaks in the lab instead of the cafeteria. People sought me out when they needed help with their science homework, but real friendships? Those were rare. The only people who truly understood me were Grandma and Grandpa. They were my safe haven. "Look what I found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out a stack of scientific journals or a new tool for my experiments. "Thought this might interest you." They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. They listened, really listened, as I explained my latest projects, their eyes alight with curiosity and pride. Yet, despite their unwavering support, the void left by my parents' indifference stretched wide and unfilled. At school events, I'd watch other families' mothers beaming with pride, fathers hugging their children, siblings cheering each other on, and feel an ache so deep it was almost physical. Then came the news that changed everything. At 16, I had completed all my high school requirements and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left felt like taking my first real breath of fresh air. The campus buzzed with energy, and for the first time, I wasn't the odd one out. In my advanced chemistry class, I met Ada and Michael, two people who got just as excited about molecular structures as I did. We'd spend hours in the lab, tossing around theories, laughing over failed experiments, celebrating discoveries that would make most people's eyes glaze over. For the first time in my life, I had friends who understood me. Still, a part of me clung to the hope that my family might one day see me really see me. I called home weekly, searching for something more than the usual distant, perfunctory conversations. "Yes, Rosalind, that's nice," Mom would say whenever I tried to share my research. Then, inevitably, she'd shift gears. "Oh, did you hear about Clara's new job? She's working at that fancy boutique downtown. As if my achievements were invisible. As if I were invisible. I didn't know it then, but my time at university was merely the calm before the storm. It happened during one of my routine calls home. I was midway through my second semester, deep into my research, when Mom's voice caught my attention. "And with your father's condition getting worse." She must have thought I was on mute. My stomach twisted. "What about Grandpa?" I interrupted, my heart hammering. "Mom, what's wrong with him?" There was a pause, far too long to be innocent. "Oh, Rosalind," she said, her voice shifting. "I didn't realize you were still on the line. It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering." "I'm coming home," I said immediately, already calculating the fastest way to get there. No, don't be ridiculous," Mom said sharply. "You need to focus on your studies. Clara is helping them out. Everything's under control." Something about her tone felt off, but I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, so I called Grandma right after. "Oh, yes, dear," Grandma said, her voice strangely distant. "Clara's been such a help. She comes by often to check on your grandfather." "Clara, the same sister who always said visiting our grandparents was boring?" Something didn't add up. 2 weeks later, I stood at my grandparents' familiar front door, my heart pounding. Instead of Grandma's warm welcome, I found Clara blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her face a mask of fake surprise. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma." "How is he?" "No one's home," she said quickly, too quickly. "They're out. Grandpa's sick. Where would they go?" "I don't know, Rosalind, just go away," she snapped, starting to close the door. "Wait!" I stuck my foot in the doorway. "Let me come in and wait for them." "No one's home," she shouted, shoving the door hard against my foot. "God, you're so annoying, just leave." Confused and hurt, I backed away. I tried calling Grandma, but the call went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like her at all. Something was very wrong, and I was determined to find out what. Grandma always kept her phone on for me, always. So, when I couldn't reach her that day, I didn't know where else to go but my parents' house. Maybe they had answers. When I walked into the kitchen, they both turned to look at me, startled. Dad didn't even try to hide his annoyance. "What are you doing home?" he asked, his voice clipped. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma," I said, trying to steady my voice. "But they're not home. Clara wouldn't let me in." "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, exchanging a glance with Dad. Her tone was light, but I could sense something beneath it. "We were going to tell you. Your grandparents are in a nursing home." The world seemed to lurch beneath me. "What?" I stammered. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "It was a quick decision," Dad said smoothly, his voice frustratingly even. "They needed specialized care. It's better this way." "Which nursing home?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I want to visit them." "They're under quarantine right now," Mom cut in, too quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "No visitors allowed. Maybe next time." Something about the way they spoke calm, practiced, made me feel like I was slamming into an invisible wall. No matter how much I wanted to push, I knew I wouldn't get the truth. Eventually, I went back to university, but I couldn't let go of that conversation. The image of Clara's hostile glare, my parents' unnervingly smooth responses, and the door I had been kept from stepping through haunted me. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of an experiment. The fluorescent lights above me seemed louder than usual, their hum pressing against my skull as my phone lit up with Mom's number. Something was wrong. I felt it before I even answered. "Rosalind," Mom said, her voice flat, devoid of warmth. "Your grandfather passed away last night." The test tube slipped from my fingers, shattering against the floor. The sharp crack echoed through the lab, loud as a gunshot. "What?" My voice came out in a whisper, fragile and disbelieving. "No." "The funeral's Thursday at 2 p.m., she continued, as if reading from a script. Don't be late. The call ended. I didn't bother cleaning up the broken glass. I barely registered my classmates' concerned glances as I rushed out of the lab, my mind spinning. Grandpa was gone. The one person who had always believed in me, who had encouraged me every step of the way, gone. And I hadn't even gotten the chance to say goodbye. The entire trip home was a blur. Memories flooded my mind, his warm smile, the way his eyes would light up when I talked about my research, the endless afternoons spent discussing science over cups of tea. And then, Thursday came. At 1:30 p.m., I pulled into the church parking lot, empty. A cold sense of unease coiled around my spine as I stepped inside. My footsteps echoed in the silent hall, the faint scent of cleaning products hanging in the air. A custodian stood nearby, mopping the floor. "The Walker funeral?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked up, frowning. "That ended hours ago? They held it at 10 a.m. The words hit me like a physical blow. My knees nearly buckled as I grabbed onto a nearby pew for support. Frantically, I pulled out my phone and dialed my parents. Mom answered on the second ring. "Oh, Rosalind," she sighed, her voice dripping with mock disappointment. "You must have mixed up the times. We clearly said 10 a.m. "No," I said firmly, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "You said 2 p.m. I wrote it down. I know what I heard." Dad's voice slid in, smooth as ever. "Your grandmother is still in the nursing home, and she doesn't want to see you right now. She's very upset that you missed the funeral." Their words felt like knives cutting deeper with every syllable. Shaken and desperate for answers, I told them I was heading back to university, but my feet had other plans. Without even realizing it, I found myself driving to my grandparents' house. The familiar street looked exactly the same. The old oak tree, the neatly tended garden, the wind chimes Grandma loved so much. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened and there she was. Grandma, the same Grandma who was supposedly in a nursing home, refusing to see me. Relief flooded through me as I moved to hug her, but she stepped back, and the look in her eyes stopped me cold. Her face was hard, unfamiliar, like she was looking at a stranger. "Grandma?" I whispered, but the word felt hollow. I didn't know how to process the coldness in her gaze, the sharpness in her posture. This wasn't the woman who had once been my safe haven. I had always been different, captivated by the world around me in ways that confused my family. Even as a child, I'd collect leaves, rocks, or anything else I could examine with a tiny magnifying lens I'd taken from a cereal box. While Clara played with dolls and dreamed of being a princess, I was asking questions my parents didn't have time to answer. "Mom, why do leaves change color and fall?" I'd ask, holding up a bright red maple leaf. "Ask your teacher, Rosalind," Mom would reply, barely glancing at me. "I'm busy helping Clara with her dance costume." This was my childhood, a constant stream of questions about science and the environment met with dismissive answers. When I was 7, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a collection of household objects spread out in front of me. I was experimenting, fascinated by the reaction of baking soda mixed with different liquids. "What in heaven's name are you doing?" Mom's voice broke my concentration. "Observe this," I said proudly, holding up the fizzing mixture. "Now clean it up," she snapped. "I need the kitchen spotless. Clara's friends are coming over for her birthday party." Clara's birthday parties were always extravagant dozens of guests, life-sized cartoon characters, endless entertainment. In stark contrast, mine were small, quiet gatherings. Just my grandparents, a plain cake, and a few candles. I never complained, but the difference was glaring. "Here's your birthday present, sweetheart," Dad would say, handing me yet another copy of a scientific encyclopedia. And while I genuinely loved those books, it was impossible to ignore the mountain of toys and gadgets Clara unwrapped at her celebrations. Even then, I understood where my parents' true focus lay. Now, standing in front of my grandmother, her cold stare cutting through me, it felt like my family had finally, irrevocably, turned their backs on me. The only real warmth I had ever known came from my dad's parents. My grandparents were my refuge, the one place where I felt understood. Every weekend, every school vacation, they welcomed me with open arms. "Tell me more about what you've learned this week, little scientist," Grandpa would say, his eyes lighting up as I eagerly shared my latest discoveries. With them, I was never too much, never too different. I was simply me. Clara never came with me. "They're so boring," she'd complain. Besides, Mom and Dad are taking me to the new theme park this weekend. I'd watch from the window as they drove off without me, my chest tight with a mix of hurt and jealousy. "Why can't I go too?" I asked once, desperate to be included. Mom barely glanced at me as she ruffled my hair. "Oh, honey, it wouldn't be fun for you. You'd probably just want to learn how the rides work." That was how it always was. I didn't fit their mold of what a daughter should be. I was the one who asked too many questions, who preferred microscopes to makeup, while Clara was their perfect match, a normal girl with normal interests. Then everything changed. It was my first year of middle school when I met the first person outside of my grandparents who truly saw me. My science teacher, Mrs. Sagan. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, your daughter has extraordinary potential," she said at a parent-teacher meeting. I sat just outside the classroom, but I could hear every word. I've never seen a student grasp difficult scientific concepts so naturally. "We should consider moving Rosalind into the gifted program." Mom's disapproving tone was immediate. "That sounds like a lot of work," she said flatly. "She's doing fine where she is. Besides, we have to think about Clara. Rosalind shouldn't get preferential treatment." The words shouldn't have surprised me, but they still stung. I knew what was coming. They were going to say no. They always said no when it came to me. But then Grandma found out. The very next day, she stormed into my school like a general preparing for battle. Standing tall in the principal's office, her voice was firm, unwavering. "My granddaughter will take those exams and be given every opportunity she deserves," Grandma declared. "I don't care what her parents think." The principal hesitated. "Mrs. Walker, we need parental consent." "My son and his wife will be under my care," she said coldly. "You just make sure Rosalind gets her chance." And somehow, she made it happen. After a week of heated arguments and I suspect some financial persuasion from my grandparents, my parents reluctantly agreed to let me take the placement tests. I excelled in every single one of them. Suddenly, my world opened up in ways I had never imagined. The gifted program introduced me to international science competitions, academic olympiads, and research seminars. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who got excited about the same things I did. It felt like coming home. My first international competition project focused on sustainable ecosystems, and I won. Then I won another, and another. I threw myself into my work, fueled by a passion that had always been inside me but had finally found its place to shine. That moment around Grandma's dining table is one I will never forget. She stood at the head of the room, Grandpa's letter trembling slightly in her hands, though her voice remained firm. "To my son and daughter-in-law," she read, her tone unwavering, "your treatment of your daughters has been shameful. Every child deserves equal love and support, yet favoritism has poisoned this family." "Stop!" Clara shrieked, springing to her feet. "This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything?" Her outburst sent a shockwave through the room. She turned on our parents, her voice shrill and raw. "You promised," she spat. "You said if I played nice, if I visited him and acted like the perfect granddaughter, everything would be mine. You made me grovel to a dying man." Her words struck like a slap, laying bare the ugly truth. She wasn't grieving Grandpa, she was furious that her performance hadn't earned her the reward she expected. "And now what?" she raged, her voice rising. "Little Miss Perfect gets a whole laboratory and I only get half the money? No, give me the house, she doesn't need both, she can keep her stupid lab." I sat frozen as my sister's mask shattered, revealing what had always been beneath entitlement, bitterness, resentment. Mom finally broke the tense silence. "Rosalind, you heard your sister. Be reasonable. Do you know how much we've invested in your education? All those science camps, competitions." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You didn't pay for any of that," I said quietly. "Grandma and Grandpa did." "That's not the point," Mom snapped, her frustration flaring. "Family means sacrifice. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share to Clara. She needs it more than you do." "Honor his memory?" Grandma's voice cut through the room like a whip. She straightened, fire flashing in her eyes as she lifted the letter again. "Let me remind you exactly what Thomas had to say about this family's idea of sacrifice." She continued reading, her voice unwavering. "To my son and his wife, your blatant favoritism has poisoned this family. Your treatment of Rosalind has been nothing short of emotional abuse, while you've turned Clara into an entitled, spoiled brat." "How dare you!" Clara shrieked. "No! How dare you!" Grandma's voice thundered back, shaking with emotion. "You deceived and manipulated a dying man, and now you have the gall to talk about sacrifice and family?" She stormed to the door and flung it open. "Leave, all of you." Her voice wavered, not from fear, but from fury. "I'm only sorry Thomas left you anything at all. Clara, you are nothing but a pampered, self-centered girl who learned her selfishness from her pampered, self-centered parents." Slamming doors, shouted threats, then silence. And just like that, they were gone. That was 5 years ago. Grandpa's research facility, the one he built for me, is my home now. It's more than I ever dreamed of, and sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still feel his presence proud, loving, and always encouraging. Grandma visits often. Her curiosity is as sharp as ever, and she loves to ask about my latest projects. She even takes science courses at the local community college, claiming they help her understand my work better, though I suspect she just wants to share in the excitement Grandpa and I always had. As for Clara and my parents, I haven't spoken to them since. Their names still pop up on my phone from time to time, or in my inbox, but I delete the messages without reading them. They made their choice, and I made mine. The other day, I found an old photo tucked inside one of Grandpa's books. It was of me as a little girl, peering through a magnifying lens in his backyard while he pointed something out. On the back, he had written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I keep that photo on my desk now. It reminds me that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who believe in you, who love you for who you are, and who celebrate your differences instead of trying to erase them.